Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all so much for joining us for the webinar on why learning to build is more important than learning to code. So I'd like to introduce you all to today's speaker, Nick Gamble. As Vice President of Solutions, Nick has led the technical design and implementation for a number of Uncork's largest clients, including New York City, Goldman Sachs, and a slew of other Fortune 100 companies. This experience led him to found a new department pioneering the development of reusable patterns and extensions to the capabilities of the platform, all while using Uncork. Prior to joining Uncork in the early stage, Nick spent his career in software development, helping startups get off the ground and enterprises digitally transform. These roles took him around the world, gaining a deep passion and understanding of how to build global systems and how people will use them. So with that said, I'd like to hand things over to Nick, and he'll take you through today's presentation.
Thank you, MG, and thank you everybody for joining today and taking time out of your day. As we're going to be talking about the difference between building and coding today, I think it's important we start by looking a little bit at the coding landscape. And I think boot camps are an interesting way to analyze that, given the tremendous traction that they've had over the past 10 years. There were 11 times more bootcamp grads in 2019 than there were in 2013. This is because companies are looking for candidates to code using their particular tech stack, and they're willing to pay top dollar for software engineers with the matching language skills. But as we all know, keeping up with the constant challenges of learning to code is really difficult. We've seen in studies that there was actually no overlap in the top 10 tech skills from 2016 to 2019 and the top 10 in 2020. The tech industry and software development moves at an impossibly fast pace. And learning to code can be time sensitive and costly. And of course, once you learn to code, you'll never stop trying to keep up with more relevant languages. So I think it's interesting to take a look at those two slides. And as there's more and more focus on learning specific technologies, and then those technologies are quickly being phased out in favor of newer technologies. But I think we have to look past just the future of programming languages or technologies as they evolve and look at actually the future of coders. According to Martin Ford, there is a 50% excess supply of full-time software engineers since the role of coder has fundamentally shifted. This is due in part to advanced algorithms, which are allowing companies to outsource jobs not even anymore overseas, but actually outsourcing jobs back into computers. It's features such as automation, machine learning, natural language processing that is facilitating this trend. And we've already seen that a lot in many industries as many jobs are being automated. And there's no reason to think that the role of a software engineer is immune to that trend going forward. So that's why at Uncork, we believe the idea of building is much more important than coding. To us, building refers to anything from designing products to designing algorithms, and that it's best to immerse yourself in the key foundational concepts of your industry. Whether you're in the insurance industry and you want to look at those foundational concepts of an insurance policy and the life cycle it's going to go through, or if you're in the technology industry, those foundational concepts of the solutions that you're building. Building is about learning the logic and the mechanics behind what you're creating instead of just the inputs that can make it happen. And as we just talked about, coding language are constantly changing, but knowing the logic of building an application in a macro sense is a lifelong skill that will help you future-proof your career. There's a great quote here. The reason Silicon Valley companies pay engineers big bucks is because when you have complex architectures in mammoth programs, coding is less important than problem solving. And actually, as we were preparing for this webinar and I saw this quote, actually reminded me of something that MG mentioned in the intro about the time I spent abroad. I just want to take a quick aside for an anecdote related to that, because as I was traveling and living in different countries, I really wanted to be able to communicate with the locals in those various places. And as I had a pretty good deal of success in that endeavor, a lot of people would ask me like, Nick, what's your secret? And what I basically told them was the way I approached learning a language was the same way I approached solving a technology problem. breaking it down into the pieces that are transferable across everything. Sentence structure, grammar, parts of speech, the fundamentals of language, not so much the vocabulary or the pronunciation. And it was focusing on that and breaking down language, whether it's a human language or a computer programming language, that allows your skills to transcend and be applicable across. So I thought I'd just mention that. Getting back on track, with the focus being on building, it's really no code that Unqork thinks allows you to harness the power of the builder. And that is because with no code, you only need to understand the business logic and the problem solving, not the code itself. If we look back through the history of the evolution of programming languages, I think we've seen this trend a lot over time. We can go all the way back to the 80s, where there were lower level languages that were very difficult to learn and even harder to use. And heck, you go back even further than COBOL and C++, and you have assembly, and you go back further than that, and you have punch cards, even harder to learn, even harder to use. We started to see more of a move to higher level languages. One of those first real big levels of abstraction that was added to abstract out the low level concepts that you dealt with in the other programming language, something maybe like memory allocation. And then that abstraction was presented through a syntax that was more human readable, human understandable, using actual language, a human language in your code. Those languages obviously were adopted, obviously took over, and led to better productivity gains. I think the next level of abstraction that we saw that led to the next amount of productivity gains was frameworks. It again provided a level of abstraction for the programmer. It abstracted away things such as routing or things such as validation and allowed the programmer to focus on the business-specific rules to their application. And we here at Uncork feel that next level of evolution and that next level of abstraction is no code, and a completely visual platform that will lead to some of the largest productivity gains that we've seen. And we believe we're at the forefront of that evolution. So to understand why we think that we're there, just a little bit of history about who is Uncork. First off, we're enterprise grade. A lot of times when people think of no-code platforms, they think of website builders like Squarespace, brochure websites. Uncork is a platform to build complex solutions in regulated environments at an enterprise level. We're backed by some of the leaders, not only in the industries that we're providing solutions for, but also in the technology industry, capital G being the investment arm of Alphabet and Google. We're built on top of a modern, single-tenant, multi-cloud environment that can be deployed globally. We're currently deployed in more than 8 countries across multiple continents. We have thousands of designers, creators trained in Uncork, building solutions that are processing billions of dollars in transactions for our clients. Our clients coming from the top of their industries, building solutions with Uncork that they would otherwise rely on code to build. So how does no code work? No code is unified. Everything you need is in a single platform. Your front end, your back end, your data ingestion, your infrastructure, all unified in a single place. You don't need to choose one technology for front end, one for back end, one for data, one for infrastructure, all in one. It's visual. Our drag and drop interface allows you to build even the most complex operations in a manner that is as easy to understand for the person who's creating, as well as for the person who's going to come in and maintain it later on. And as I said before, it's enterprise grade, meeting some of the top enterprise standards, SOC 2, Privacy Shield, GDPR, and the like. What does this result in? This results in increased speed and flexibility. Since again, we're able to further abstract the high volume coding tasks that people are often confronted with, you can focus immediately on the business logic that is unique to you. It enhances collaboration as it allows a wide range of internal stakeholders the ability to apply their relevant knowledge to your business directly into the solution. It enables seamless integration. As you continue to evolve your business and the technology that supports it, we're able to easily integrate into some of those legacy systems which might take longer to replace and are still powering large functions of your business. And it provides a very advanced data functionality, again, from ingestion to integration to manipulation, which becomes increasingly important, as we all know, as more and more data is coming into all the platforms that are being built. So with all of that said, I think it's going to be more fun that we actually just jump into an example of Uncork, and then also focused really on the things at Uncork, that the different way we're doing it, the different way that no code does something that used to be coded. So I happen to be a very big baseball fan. I don't know how many of you all are, and we have a brief window right now where we might actually get a season. So I wanted to make this a little fun and base our demo around baseball. So we're gonna do a little demo about MLB, and we're gonna start with our workflow builder. So this is using your standard BPM notation that you would expect in a lot of other systems. So we're gonna open it up with some data collection. So we're going to grab a new screen and drop it in. First thing we're going to collect is the player information. Okay? We're going to create a brand new module to collect player information. Okay? And that's all we're going to do to start. We're going to connect the start. We're going to connect the end. All right? We'll save that. Now let's go and let's actually add some logic into this. So this is the Uncork module builder. So think of a module as a page. Okay, that a user is going to see, or as you'll later see, that can actually be an API. Let's start to collect some data about the player. So the first and most basic field we have at Uncork is your text field. Okay, this is something you're going to see everywhere. So we'll call it first name. We're going to collect the first name of somebody. So normally you'd have to write some HTML here in order to create a first name field. If you wanted to add in tooltips or helper text, you have more HTML to create of elements that are linked together. You might need to add in different kind of masks for how things look. You actually, if you wanted to determine whether you're going to store something in the database, again, this is about the unification here. You actually control whether or not you want to store data in your database directly through the same interface as you're controlling that field appearing on the screen. Again, tying that front end and the back end together. Okay, and then of course validation. We want to make sure the person enters the first name, as that's pretty important info. So we're actually just going to check that it's required. Okay. Let's do the same thing again, very simply for last name, because most of us have the last and the first name. And once again, let's just check that it is required. Okay. Now, how about another field? How about date inputs? So I remember, full disclosure, I was a software engineer by trade most of my life. And I remember date components and date pickers and all that kind of stuff being really, really difficult. You had to go find the favorite date picker library and pull in their code and integrate with it and style it and all that kind of good jazz and validate against it. But we're actually just going to build add in a component that we have out of the box. So we're going to put in the debut date. So let's say the first day I ever, made it to the big show, as they say. Okay. A lot of other features available and settings that you would otherwise have to code here. One feature that's very popular is storing the date only. We can store date and time. We'll store. Lastly, again, going back to validations, which are always one of the trickiest things, since we're talking about when in baseball, probably going to be we can very easily restrict input to only dates in the past. Okay. The last thing we're going to do is, or actually not even the last, but another thing I want to know is, what team do you play for? Okay. So we have a drop down, which we'll call team. We'll call it team. And our drop down components, you can think of any website that has a drop down of options. There's a couple ways you can configure those options in Uncork. One is you can simply type in the actual team names that you want to allow the person to select from. But you probably don't want to manage that on your own in your application. So actually, I found that Major League Baseball was nice enough to provide us with an API that you can pull back all the teams available in baseball. So I'm actually going to drop in that URL that MLB provides. Okay. I looked at that URL and I found that all my teams are listed here, and they provided us with an abbreviation and a full name. Okay. I'll save that. And then lastly, I want to ask one other question with another component that we've abstracted and built out of the box, which is our radio component. We're going to call that position. And in this case, we're going to say, are you a pitcher or are you a hitter? Okay. I'll save this module and I will preview our workflow. Let me log in for you. Okay, and there it is. I've now built that web page very quickly. I can type in my name. Let's say I debuted last month. I have a list, as I said, of all the teams currently in baseball. I happen to be a big Washington Nationals fan, the world champion, so I'll select them. And let's say I'm a hitter. And that's it. I've now collected some data. Okay? Unqork also provides APIs out of the box. So if I want to view that data, I can very easily pull up the data that I'm creating. And I'll continue to come back to this page as we continue to change our demo. Okay, so now we've built some very quick data collection. You see, not only was it very fast in terms of our ability to get up on the screen, but we're able to add in a lot of common things that you'd have to code into your platform and find maybe different libraries to integrate in to be able to create the entire experience that you're looking for. But now let's get in a little more interesting here. Let's say we want to do some decision-based logic, if, else statements, that kind of stuff. We're going to use a gateway component, okay? And the gateway will then allow us to make decisions and take a user to different places in the application based off of the inputs that we provided, okay? So we're going to another screen. We'll call this one pitcher stats, okay? Create a new module. And we'll create another screen. And we'll call this one hitter stats, okay? I'll create another new module, okay? And now we're going to drag from that gateway, and we're going to say that we want to, if the position is pitcher, we're going to take them to this screen. All right. And then we'll say is hitter. If the position equals hitter, we're going to go to the hitter screen. Okay. We'll add a couple of end nodes now, because now we've split our path. So we'll have two different ways to end. All right, let's save that workflow again. Let's go open these modules. All right, let's add a couple basic things here. If we want to collect statistics about a pitcher, one of the most important things is, all right, well, how many innings did they pitch? Okay, how many times were they out there on the mound? And maybe for this one, we don't want to say they ever went less than one inning, and they're probably never going to pitch more than 1,000 innings in a season. Okay, we'll add another number, and we'll call that runs. So the runs are, when the batter comes around and touches home plate, how many runs did they let up? If you have a really good pitcher, I guess they could, let up 0. And if you have a really bad pitcher, maybe they can let up a lot more. So we'll add that in. Okay, we'll do the same thing over here for our hitter. Similar questions. For the hitter, though, we want to know how many times they were at bat, so how many times they got up there and tried to hit that ball. Again, we want them to have a minimum of 1, but they probably won't get up there more than 1,000 times. And then a number. We'll call this hits. And again, they could actually get 0. And since they can only go up there 1,000 times, they'll never get more than 1,000 hits. It'd be really great if they got 1,000, so we'll leave it at that. Okay. Now we've processed that. Let's preview our workflow again. So now I'll put in another team, put in another pseudonym of myself. Say I debuted on the 20th. And again, notice that I can't select dates in the future. They're all grayed out because of that other logic. I can't even move forward in the months, actually. This time around, I'm going to play for the Yankees. And this time I'll be a pitcher again. And now it'll take me to the pitcher stats because I said I was a pitcher. I pitched 100 innings and I let up 30 runs, and now I'm done. If we do this again, I'll come back in again. I'll be Nikki, just like when I was a kid, when I really loved baseball. And you know what? I actually really liked the Yankees when I was a kid. I'm a hitter. I move forward, and now it's going to ask me a different set of questions based on the position that I was playing. So now we've shown again things such as decision-based logic, redirecting between pages and triggering browser events and all those things that you would do in code, done very visually in this manner. One last thing I want to show is getting a little more complex here, but something that's, I think, really important anytime you're developing an application now is APIs. Okay, you're often integrating with an external API, but you're also often building APIs of your own. Now, Unqork comes with something I showed here, which is this out-of-the-box API, a very easy, RESTful way to see the data that's coming into your system, which we have the initial person I put in as well as the new players that I added in. But it also allows you to build your own APIs very simply, very visually. So actually, I went ahead and I created a couple of, just to save a little bit of time, I created a couple of APIs. So let's look up. I have this one and this one. Okay. I have an all-star API for the pitcher, which says, give me the information that we've collected about that pitcher, how many innings they pitch and how many runs they let up, and calculate whether or not they're an all-star. And do the same thing for batters. How many times they, I actually had a typo here. How many times they were up at bat, how many hits they got, and whether or not they're an all-star. So let me demonstrate. Let me just go over this configuration. So first off, we have our calculator component. Okay, calculator component allows us to take inputs and run very quick calculations on it. So in this case, I'm saying take in the at-bats from the player, take in the number of hits they have, and calculate their batting average, very popular statistic for a batter, based on this very simple formula. Okay? Then I want to say, well, based on that calculation, are you an all-star? And in order to say that, I'm saying, let's take a range of your average. And if your average is from 0 to 0.299, because it's out of 0 to 1, you are not an all-star. And then effectively, if you're anything else, you're an all-star, which would mean if you're over a 300 or up batting average, you're an all-star. Very similar logic here for the pitcher. Same concept, same exact component usage, except in this case, I said, let's calculate your ERA, which is the average number of runs you let up, which is this little formula. Very simple math. And then again, a decision to say if you're in a given range, you might be an all-star or not. Okay? And now let's actually integrate those into our page. So we're on the hitter stats. So we want to integrate with the hitter API that we created. So let's go ahead and let's first drop in another field here. And we'll call this field all-star. Okay. All right. And we're actually going to put this field into read-only view, because we don't want the person to change whether or not they're an all-star. We're going to tell them if they're an all-star. So with a simple flip of the toggle, you can actually make dynamic content be only readable. Okay. And then we're actually going to use one of our plugin components. So this is one of the more advanced components, and this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite component in Uncork, is effectively a visual API integrator. So if you think about all the various frameworks and all the various languages, they're all going to have their own different way in order to, create an HTTP request, create a body for the request, send the body, get back a response, parse the response, output the response, handle the errors, and all things like that. We're going to do that directly in Uncork. Okay. Now we can define our inputs visually here. So what we're actually going to send to the API. So in this case, we're going to send, sorry, what am I in hitters? Let's go data.atbats. And that would be the at-bats field. You'll see it's going to look on, dynamically find all the components on the page. And we'll do data.hits, which is the hits field. These are both required, so I'm not going to submit the request unless you've actually filled in the data. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the value from the response into the component of All-Star. Okay. And then I want to trigger that. So I'm going to add a button component. And let's call that submits fine. Are you an All-Star? Okay. A button can do a number of different things in Unqork. It could actually save all the data on the page. It can validate the data on the page. In this case, we're just going to have it trigger something. And we want to trigger our plugin for Plug All-Star. Okay. Now, before I even show it to you on the front end, I want to show another very nice feature of Unqork, which is testing, right? So testing is another thing, writing unit tests. How do you test your code? Ability for QA to do things. You can actually test your APIs directly within Unqork. So in this case, I'm putting in at bats, and I'm putting in hits. And let's say I had 100 at bats and 30 hits. I can actually execute my data here, and I can see that my response is going to say, yes, I'm an All-Star, because I have 30 hits out of 100. If I had 20 hits out of 100, my batting average would be under, and I'm not an All-Star. Okay? So now we've actually built a little API here, which you can test within Unqork, or you can integrate, obviously, directly into your system. So if we save that, we'll preview this one more time. Okay? My French name. And I'll pick the Nats again because they used to be the Montreal Expos, since I'm using my French name here. And I'm a hitter. I go next, and I say, let's say I had 354 at bats and I had 76 hits, because I don't know. Am I an All-Star? Whoop, what did I do? Let me jump back here for a quick second. And let me just see, we got at bats, we've got hits, oh, we got hits, we have our plug All-Star, which is being triggered here, we have our plugin. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't actually tell it what to call, my mistake. So down here, the plugin component, the most important part of the plugin component I forgot, of course. You can actually choose to integrate with an external service, of course, but you can also choose one of Unqork's internal services. So in this case, we're actually just going to execute another module that we've built. We're going to execute our hitter All-Star API. So I'm just going to grab this module ID. I'm going to replace it in there. Now I'm going to save it. Let me just close that out. Let me preview it again. Let me just, oops, sorry, keep hitting the wrong button there. Preview one more time. I'll go back to the Nationals again. I was a hitter. I had, oh, I have over 1,000 again. I had 99 hits. And no, I'm not an All-Star. And if I hit save after not being an All-Star, once again, now I'm going to have this information down here about not being an All-Star. So I hope that gives a pretty good view at a couple layers of abstraction that Unqork provides, and shows some of that visual nature that allows you to visually run computations, visually do decisions, whether it's decisions within a given page or whether it's decisions within the flow of your application, as well as the ability to add simple as well as very complex, such as a drop-down with dynamic data, validated data inputs, radio buttons, integrating with systems, whether it's internal or external, all of that abstracted up a layer, completely visual. And actually, I'm showing you You're getting a sneak peek even before some other folks of a very new, very clean interface to configuring components in Unqork as we continue to make the process even more visual, more clean, and more user-friendly. So I hope that was a nice, useful demo. I don't want to spend all the time just showing off our product. So I guess, MG, I'll turn it back over to you if any questions have come in and throughout the time I was talking.
Thank you, Nick. That was a really helpful demonstration, and I think we all appreciate the theme that you chose. It's very topical as well. So at this point, I just want to encourage anyone, if there are any questions, now is the time. Nick is a wealth of knowledge and is happy to answer any questions. So please, we encourage you to enter. You can submit a question via our chat function or the Q&A. We'll go ahead and give people another minute to submit any pressing questions. And if not, oh, here we go. We've got one coming in. So the question is that startups have used no-code platforms like Shopify and Squarespace to quickly enter and complete in the commercial market space. With automation and AI being the goal for most enterprises, why do you think the concept of no-code is still so challenging for some of them to embrace?
I think, I mean, when right now we think about, it's a great question. Thank you. Shopify being an example, it serves a very specific purpose. It's an e-commerce, visual e-commerce creation targeted to one specific use case. I think, because people have been tackling verticals, the reusability and the extendability of a lot of the platforms like that have been created, aren't really industry agnostic, aren't solution agnostic, and, don't allow you to really unlock everything that you're going to need to solve with technology. And I think it's actually similar to Uncork's journey and how we kind of evolved as a company. As you looked at our client list, when I was going through that deck, a lot of those clients were in the financial services industry or the insurance industry. We found early success by going after verticals and building solutions and selling to those verticals because we had people at levels in our company who had tons of experience and tons of contacts in those industries. So we found success, just as Shopify or any other e-commerce platform or any Squarespace for building brochure websites are going to find success in that specific vertical. So we found that success, but we didn't build Uncork to be an industry-specific solution. We didn't build it to be an insurance solution. We didn't build it to be a financial services solution. We really focus more on what are the capabilities, what are the underlying tools that you need to create these solutions. And then what we started to see was, it doesn't end at insurance and it doesn't end at financial services. And we started getting into public enterprise. We've done a lot of work with New York City. I'm sure some of you have seen us in the news for the work we did for New York City and the very rapid turnaround to help them deal with the COVID response. So I think that was the next validation that by taking that industry agnostic approach and focusing on underlying tool sets, we can build a product that's more extensible. And I think, as we continue to grow and as more companies take that approach to it, that's where you'll start to see the acceleration in no code when it stops being a tool that meets one specific need and starts being that whole unified visual platform that can actually solve a number of problems, including, as you mentioned, AI and automation. We're continuing to look at ways, where Uncork has those capabilities native to it. You've seen the plugin component and our ability to integrate with APIs and pulling in things like, TensorFlow and utilizing other AI things. So I think, again, is keeping it, industry agnostic and focusing on integrations as being such a key aspect of a no-code platform, you start to see the use cases that you can build and attack just growing and growing and growing, and your viability growing with it.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, that was really helpful. And we actually do have a few more questions coming in. So another one that we were posed is it possible to have PDF-like documents as an input field? Like, is it possible to have a PDF as an attachment within the workflow, I think is the ultimate question.
Yeah. So I'll just, I won't build a full demo for it, but I at least will show the back end of it. It is actually a very important aspect. So we do have file uploading as one of our out-of-the-box components as well. And we support, effectively any file that you can upload to a website is uploadable through here. Again, thinking about, if I remember back in development, file validation was so hard. Validating the size of the file and the type of the file, and then storing the file, where you're going to put it, how are you going to retrieve it? Again, those are all things that Uncork is abstracted for the user. So we have this drag and drop file component in Uncork. We allow you to restrict the size of the file very simply. You can choose the various different formats that you're willing to accept. Another thing that's very important that we have is the compression of files. So, unless you are running some photo, contest and you need to upload large photos, you probably want to compress your data and things like that. And then, of course, this file component then directly interacts, with some of the cloud storage solutions that are out there, seamless to you. And that's on the intake of files. So accepting uploads of files is very common, but also the creation of files is a very big common thing. So Uncork is the ability to generate PDFs, generate Excel files, CSV files, things like that. And then based on our integration framework, which, as I said, is very core, not just to our solution, but to the previous question, really something that I think is table stakes to having a no-code solution that's going to evolve and going to grow, is that ability to integrate. So there's effectively out-of-the-box integration with DocuSign, for example, to do the very complex workflows that they do with PDFs there. So lots of capabilities native to the platform for files.
Perfect. Another question that was posed, is it important to build a UI unit test with Uncork, and why?
Sure. I mean, I think unit testing, so that's where I think our platform is going to help your unit testing first off. So I think the ultimate answer is yes. I think you always want to be building tests. I mean, ultimately, you're building software, right? And while this visual unified nature is going to increase the speed at which you can do so, and then all the other advantages that we talked about it, ultimately you're going to be deploying, especially with the clients that we are, to the enterprise, out to the public, things of that nature. And testing is always going to be of critical importance. When it comes to unit testing, I think the first thing that's great about using a platform like this and the reusable components that come with the platform is so much of this is unit tested for you. So you have full confidence that when you drag in a number component, you don't need to write unit tests on whether or not the placeholder appears, or whether or not the tooltip appears, or whether or not you can't do the autocomplete, or whether or not it's disabled, whether or not it's required. All of these features are unit tested for you and made available to you such that you can trust that this component is going to work as expected. That's the promise that Uncork makes to you and that a no-code platform can make to you. Now, the unit tests you might want to write around that for your specific implementation is again going to be driven on the business logic. So that goes back to, allowing people to focus on the business logic and that industry-specific aspects of your solution. So while you aren't going to necessarily write a unit test to say, does this required checkbox work? If I've checked required, is it truly required? You might write a unit test on something such as, we have the ability to uncork, similar to how I showed, I selected, picture, and then picture shows up. You might want to make sure that you might have a decision. Actually, let me show you a great example. So here within the rule all-star, okay? While you don't need to unit test that the the values here, that the range functionality works within Uncork, you might want to make sure that you have put the right inputs and the right min and max in. So you could write unit tests that are run in the browser if you use something like BrowserStack or Selenium or something like that to do browser-based testing and user-based testing. But you can also even directly put your unit tests in here. So if I were to say, if I were to run the average of that and I execute it, it's saying I'm not, right? If I say 333 and I execute it, and I execute my inline unit testing, it'll tell me that I am. Very similarly, this concept is built into other components. So testing your calculations is very easy to unit test as well. So here I said, based on the number of at-bats and the number of hits, I want to calculate your average. So if I don't need to test that, the inputs are going to come in, but I might need to test that this business specific formula, how to calculate the batting average of a baseball player, how to calculate, the risk score of a company in your KYC, or the risk score of someone applying for insurance. I might need to test my underlying formulas. So I can say here, if I have 100 at bats and I have 33 hits, what's my batting average? So you can actually test some of your business specific logic directly in the Unqork components, as well as still, encouraged to write your kind of user-based, browser-based tests in some of the other tools that provide there. Again, focusing on your business logic and not on the out-of-the-box functionality that comes with a component.
Fantastic. And I appreciate that summary. I think that in many ways answers one of the other questions that was posed. But the question is, how does Uncork differentiate itself amongst competitors, but specifically, like why a client would go with Uncork as opposed to other no-code based platforms?
Sure. So I think the first thing is, I don't know, and we've, obviously every time a new one comes out, whether it's Amazon's Honeycode or other new systems come out, I mean, we're sure as heck going to go look at what they offer, and see where we are versus them and where they are versus us and what they provide and things like that. So in all of the, the competition research that we've done, one of the things that we feel very strongly about is that we are one of really the true no-code platforms. A lot of the other software that define themselves as no-code are often actually low-code. And they always give you that kind of like, fail switch at the end, that panic button which says, I can't do this without code. I need to inject some code in, and then you inject code in. And the moment you start to inject that code in, you start to go back to some of those, the issues with that is you're now creating legacy code specific to one language that people, that might, that not everybody might know. You might have, maybe different languages depending on the availability, or you might have to learn a no-code providers or a low-code providers, their specific programming language syntax for that kind of like fail-safe panic button that they have. So I think first and foremost, the fact that it is truly no code, ensuring that you're building things on top of only reusable components that again have all of that testing that comes along with it, is the first differentiator. And then, I think secondly, while, we talked about it being a very, industry agnostic platform, I do think that, a lot of the services that Uncork provides along with our platform are some of that expertise to help you, build the right tools. And as we continue, productization is something that we're very keenly focused on at Uncork. We don't just want to abstract, the code for you. We want to give you, continuing building blocks onto which you can create your specific solutions. So you'll start to see in the future more and more out of the box built products with Uncork that you can actually take in whole and add, take the 80% and add the 20% on top. And as I think that continues to come out, that speed to market will continue to increase, and you'll continue to see more and more value from the things that we provide, and like that true no-code nature that we provide and we differentiate ourselves as.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. Well, Nick, those were all of the questions that were submitted. So at this point, I'll just hand it back to you for some final remarks.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, MG. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. I'm sure some folks have seen and heard of Uncork before, so I hope this was some new stuff for you and a slightly different perspective. And for those who might be brand new to Uncork, thank you for the interest. And I hope this kind of gave you a good perspective of not just what we're doing specifically, but generally where we kind of are seeing everything move and how we can really help facilitate that. So I hope it was really educational and informative for you as well. And, hope you stay engaged. And again, thank you for your time and for your questions. I hope I was able to answer them effectively enough. And it's been great having you and been great being on. This is actually my first webinar. So it's been a fun experience. So thank you for helping make it even more enjoyable for me. Thanks again, everybody.